Okay, so yeah, we're bringing drinking back to the podcast first and foremost.
Well, you are. I've got water, but
someone's got to do it. It's gonna be me. I'll take one for the team.
I know. What were you called like in the first few weeks of this by one of my friends up in Orkney? Drunk American? No, it was a little bit more than that.
I don't know if I made this right. Oh God.
Why you got it in a glass? I normally have a nice big mug. Karen is having a hot toddy.
I don't know what I'm doing.
For those of you that are not watching us and are listening, Karen has a bit of a head cold. So I shared my age-old Scottish remedy of a hot toddy with her.
Except I have no idea what I'm really making. So
if you have not
chucked a few things in a glass.
Yeah, if you have not had a hot toddy before, a hot toddy, well, the way that I make a hot toddy might be a little bit different according to other people, is I have a good old glug of whiskey, some hot water, lemon, a slice of lemon, and some honey, and it will take away whatever cold you've got. It's like the cure all. It's a good old Scottish cure all to everything. So if you're feeling shit, have a hot toddy and you'll feel better. Usually because then you're drunk, so that's why you feel better, because you don't care anymore. Usually if I have a head cold and I have a hot toddy, what it does is it makes me not care about the fact that I feel shit.
I'm in for anything.
I don't think there's actually anything medicinal in it. I think it just makes you
except I took Tylenol, so I have to be careful because I know you're not supposed to drink.
God, that could be Tylenol. Absolutely tragic. Can
That's
you imagine?
Bad.
Kicks in like half an hour and all of a sudden you're not making sense anymore.
Yeah, or I feel amazing because I have painkiller and this amazing hot toddy in my system together. Can that really cause damage? We probably can.
Nah,
just drink it slowly.
We shouldn't really give out medical advice on
no. I just
listen to us.
I had the most stressful morning and I have a cold. Yeah, and it's not COVID. I did actually get tested and I do not have COVID. It's just
I think it's just cold. That now that people are going out and about, they're passing head colds on to each other as well, that you didn't come in contact with because you were.
It just sucks now though, because anytime anyone gets a cold, you're like COVID. Like you can't just get a regular cold anymore. You have to get a test. It's so stupid. But I mean, it's the right thing to do. I don't mind getting it. It's just annoying.
Last year, I spent the greater part of the summer months playing Is It Allergies or COVID roulette. So like every time I got an itchy throat and a runny nose, which is like my go-to allergy, like is it allergies or COVID?
I know.
And then I feel better in a few hours. I'm like, is allergies okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I know. Now I'm a little paranoid that I forgot I took that Tylenol. I'm going to drink this really, really slowly.
I thought you were going to say I'm going to drink this really quickly.
Really quick. Down the hatch.
Down it.
How it goes.
It's tell us what we're speaking about this week, because I have no idea.
Oh my God, that's right.
Before we start though, you have been a big old tease. You had me wondering for like the last 3 days. You said, I have something I want to tell you about, but I'm going to wait until we're speaking on our podcast. So that was like the worst thing to do to anyone, because it's had me wondering for the last 3 days. What is it? What is it?
So it's actually, so I will tell you, and it's the basis. It's the basis for today's episode, because I found this amazing podcast series called Witch Hunt, which is put on by BBC Radio Scotland. And it's a 6-episode series and it is so good. But I'm going to be spoiling all of it pretty much today. But don't worry, because I don't come even remotely close to being as good as talking about this as they do. I mean, it's like a massive professors from all over the world that they have coming in. They have special effects and music and like they totally kill it. It's like how every podcast should be. But
so is it a little bit like how, even though I knew the story of Burke and Hare, the tenfold more wicked series on it was just so good that it wasn't like spoilers ruined it. I knew what happened. I knew they killed their victims and how they did it, but it was just so interesting to listen. There's 2 podcasts called Witch Hunt. One's by BBC Radio Scotland and one's by The Guardian.
Oh, well, it's the Radio Scotland one. I'll definitely check out the other one too.
I am adding it
Yeah, it was so good. I listened to every single episode twice. And it is the basis for what I'm talking about today because I learned, well, I'll just go back a minute. The reason what I was researching originally was I wanted to know like what the witch and fairy connection is.
Oh yeah,
right?
because it's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and it's not really straightforward either. Just because, like, the last time I was researching what the relationships between fairies and ghosts, and so this why I was like, well, what about witches and fairies? And so, it when I was doing my regular research, there actually wasn't there's not a ton of hits out there, which I actually find really, really surprising. There is one episode, it's the third episode in this series that hits the nail right on the head. And it's literally called Friends of the Fairies. And that turned me on to this. Again, that was the 6-part series on the Scotland witch hunt trials.
Yeah. Have you listened to the I can't remember.
Hello?
I can't remember.
I was like, wait, did my computer freeze?
No, there was a big silence because I had a total brain freeze, which I'm sorry that happens when you're an oldie like me. There's another really good podcast about it's called Witches of Scotland. That's another good one.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down. And I wasn't super into the witchy thing, and I think just because I'm from really, like, my parents live into the town next to Salem is really familiar to me. Like, I grew up around there, and so I'm kind of got like desensitized and kind of turned off at how touristy and like overdone it is. And so I wasn't like super into that because of my upbringing and my own history with that on the States side of things. I've always found the Scotland part more intriguing because I feel like it was darker and spanned a much longer time period and seemed to be a much more genuine, like, ensconced part of history rather than the Salem witch trials was just like a blip, whereas the Scotland witch trials were like a series of super serious like trials that really massacred thousands of innocent women. It was a much huger scale. And
can I ask a quick question that you might not know the answer to, but I'm sure
don't.
you do.
But you can ask.
So the Salem witch trials in the States is a really popular, well-known thing.
Yeah.
Were there other witch trials throughout the United States, or was it only in Salem in that one period of time?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know.
Okay, we'll have to Google.
But I know that must have been the highest like percentage of people that were,
because that's all you ever hear about.
I know
the Salem witch trials,
right. but that's also because Salem was this pocket of Puritans that like weren't anywhere else. They were a teeny tiny little segment of really dark, fucked up individuals that were right there. Like, and like, even like my parents and sister live in Marblehead, which is literally like walking distance from, it's the next town. And that was populated by like a whole different community of people that didn't do that. So I think it's very isolated.
It's quite a badge of honor if you can trace your ancestry back to someone in Salem during that time, though. There's a lot of people that are quite chuffed about the fact that they can.
I don't know that you would want to be from a Puritan community. I don't think I would be proud of that.
Well, no, but I think it's a bit like that, being able to associate yourself with some like this thing in history that everyone is a little bit obsessed over.
Yeah. Again, to me, it's so touristy. It's so like,
I know,
it's a little cheesy. I mean, I love it. I love it, but I also am like I just desensitized, I guess, by it. It's again, and I don't know if it's because since learning about how much more sinister and serious Scotland was, seriously, I just feel like, what are you even going on about? Like, that's like nothing. Like, you're talking 100 people versus like 4,000 people.
Yeah.
You know,
over a span of
versus 100 years. Yeah. So I just feel like
lots of women and men as well throughout the whole of Scotland. I listened to quite a few episodes of the Witches of Scotland podcast, and there was one really interesting one that I don't know if I've said this on air before or even told you, but if I have, then apologies again. My age brain sometimes can't remember if I said something more than once. But it was this woman from Orkney, and they had her on as a guest, and she worked in a museum, I think, in Orkney, and she was speaking about the witch trials up in Orkney that took place. And the thing is that actually what the Witches of Scotland podcast do, which is really interesting, is that they want to actually name these people as much as they can. So they're not just
right,
a
random
person,
Jane
a
Doe's,
random person.
right.
It's a specific person from a specific town, so that we get this feeling like this thing happened to this actual
person.
People. So this woman was speaking about the witches in Orkney, and she told us on the podcast that they actually at one point, so they've got the Gallows Hill, which is, like I was speaking about last
I was gonna say, we were just talking about that.
Particular place all throughout Scotland where whatever hangings, killings, murder, not hangings of criminals or whatever.
That reminds me of, we have to talk about the stake, the burning versus bits and pieces. We need to return to that real quick.
Yeah, we do need to return to that. So she was speaking about the Gallows Hill and how the witches that were killed in Orkney during the witch trials were obviously taken to the Gallows Hill. It was common in Scotland. I hope I'm not jumping the gun with your stuff, but I don't think so, because this isn't about fairy connection, but it was common in Scotland for witches to be killed before they were burned. So they were hung and then burned. So
this is what I was going to add on to as well.
Slightly less horrific than being put in a burning pyre. But anyway, they actually found at the base of the Gallows Hill,
oh god,
remains of human ashes.
Oh, that's gross. And
isn't that sad?
Yeah.
So I guess they were maybe not burned in a crematorium, so they maybe might not have been at a high enough temperature to burn and make it complete ash, because this was from the 1500s, 1600s, so it's a long time ago.
Really long time
they must have found remains of actual bones and stuff so that they knew. But I think there was also something to do with the fact that all the human ashes at the Gallows Hill had somehow changed the soil composition there, they could tell.
I'm sure they could tell it was like human.
It was human remains. So they've actually removed them, I think, and put them in the museum.
Oh, that's kind of nice.
Know. And isn't that sad? I just
I know. And actually, it's so funny that you brought that up. Not funny, but it's ironic that you brought that up, because
we have been known to turn horrific things into funny. So
I know. And for that one YouTube commenter who thought we were mocking Isabel Gowdy, who we were not in any shape or form mocking her. We also professed our love and respect for her.
She's so cool.
I know. So just to make there's no doubt that our nod to these women is very true, and we these are innocent women,
exactly,
who were persecuted and murdered for doing nothing. Maybe they were fantastical, but just to set the record straight on that. But
just because we have a bit of a silly sense of humor, and we
does not mean we're mocking these women in any way. No. So what I was learning too, I think it was in the last episode of that series, they were talking about that as well. They didn't say that they were hung and burned, not that they weren't, but they were saying that actually they were tied to the stakes, and then they were actually their necks were they were asphyxiated around their neck, and bound.
Horrific.
Yeah, they were bound alive, strangled onto the stake, and then they would set fire to them. And they were even talking about the actual things they were using to catch on fire to make them burn. They were talking about dry heather and peat, or sometimes tar if peat wasn't available. And I'm like, I'm good on the details. I don't really need to know exactly how it was performed, but we had just talked about that on the last episode. So
I know it's this is the second week now that we're speaking about really gross, disgusting, scary things. I'm gonna have to choose something really
I know.
Lovely for next week.
Right?
Just to switch it up.
actual wings. I know. Well, this week's isn't super dark. I do find that there's bits of this that are really interesting though. And I can't even sum up this week's episode with even like a single title, or I'm going to at least struggle to. But I did learn some really interesting facts that I did not know whatsoever. And some interesting characters that came out of listening to this series as well. So I hate that today is just a summary of another cool podcast, but today is just a summary of another cool podcast. And I hope that you go listen to it. But I just
but I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because what I love about this podcasting world is that it's all like about just because you listen to one podcast doesn't mean that you have to show loyalty and not listen to other podcasts. It actually is about sharing, and if you like us, we want to share other ones that we found that we love, that we think that you'll love, and it all branches out and everyone shares in the love of story and podcast.
And sharing the knowledge. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm definitely, and I'm also not, which I'm also not like pretending that like this was my research and like I'm not mentioning, I'm like literally saying I learned all of this from this amazing source, and this is what the source is, and you should definitely check it out.
I'm listening to that tonight, by the way. I am listening to that tonight in bed. Is it so gruesome it's going to give me nightmares?
No, it's not. What I love about it is that there's so many professors and experts. There's like psychologists and experts, and they talk about like little tiny bits of the witchcraft trials that I never even dawned on. It never dawned on me to think about. And they really like pull it apart into on almost like a minutia level, but also such an intellectual level. Like I can't even do it justice, which is why you need to go listen. But just little things like why and how they got the confessions that they did, and like what made like they talked about like the actual victims themselves, but they also talked about like James as a person, like King James. And like he was such like he was an intellectual, like he was scholarly and intellectual, and like how interesting what an interesting like aspect for a king to be like that. Oh, I'm getting attacked by cats and dogs right now. Hi, Maggie. And like that whole part of it, and like his like publishing demonology, like what that did for people, and like also why he did the things that he did, but and also things I didn't know, which like and this is kind of what I liked about this, is it gave me like insight into the overall like cultural or historical backdrop, like what was happening at the time that made that initiated the witchcraft trials, like what happened. And I'm really lousy at like piecing together these little historical bits, and so I really appreciated this series because it helped me put the puzzle pieces together a little bit, which was like first, like if there's like a little mental timeline, like first, like Protestantism comes to Scotland for the first time. Up until this time, it was Catholic, and prior to that, it was like paganism, basically. And so all of a sudden, you have this shift from like super Catholic to like super Protestants, and then you have this wave of new priests that like come in to Scotland, and they're like out with the old, in with the new, and they have to basically like their job is to like get everybody on board, like no more, we're like denouncing everything Catholic and paganism, and like this is the new thing. And it's hard to do that, it turns out. Like people have been living here for thousands of years and are very set in their ways and have been talking to fairies this whole time, and are also
it wasn't like it was an option in those days, where nowadays there's like, you know, you take a census and you go, what religion are you, or what faith are you, and there'll be people that tick the Hindu box and people that tick the Muslim box, and people say they're Jewish or whatever. Then it was like, if you're not this religion, then
you'll die, like
you'll die.
Actually,
and then actually the thing is that it was then okay for those people to be that religion for 10 years, and then some new ruler would come in that wanted to switch it all around,
Right.
and you had to suddenly pretend that, oh no, well, I never wanted to be Catholic in the first place, I'm actually really Protestant instead, which actually just shows that it was all kind of a bit rubbish.
A little random, but
no,
yeah.
like just there was a lot of lying involved there.
Well, it's a lot of
there was a lot of saving your own skin. It's a lot of double switcheroos just to save your own skin.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
if you were, there were people that really had a lot of conviction and were prepared to go to the guillotine or the head chopping off block, or get burned at the stake or hung, drawn, and quartered because they refused to switch from one religion to another. But there were a lot of,
other people who are going to save their own
neck. And Johns in the village who wanted to save their own skin and just went, yeah, of course I am that. I've always been that. I was never this. What are you talking about?
Right.
And yeah.
Well, and no, I know. And the flipping is, I mean, that continues throughout history. And that's why we have all these wars, and it's responsible for like more death. And then that is just,
I know, we won't get on a rant
unimaginable. But anyways, back to King James. What I also didn't realize was that this all like started with him, which I knew that I did know that it was this time period. I did know, not that it matters what I knew or didn't know, but I was familiar with him and his, he had the witchcraft act of 1563, I want to say. And I knew that, but what I didn't know was the kind of the backstory to that, which I thought was super interesting, which was that, so at this time, this is before that, 1563, he was set to, and it's such like a normal person's story. Like he was arranged to get married to Princess Anne of Denmark. And so she tries to come over to get married, and there were all these huge storms. So it was making it really, really difficult. And for a long time, people were said to, or the weather have said to be influenced by lots of things.
They thought witches conjured up the storms, didn't
they? They did. They thought certain people were capable of like conjuring bad weather. And so
it's very Shakespearean, that is, I feel.
I know, which is the same period of time that we're talking about here too. So then to help her out, he actually then goes to Norway to try to like meet her halfway and get her there. And then again, the storms were even worse. And he was like,
had he ever met her?
I don't know. I doubt it.
I wonder if he'd ever met her before he went to rescue his maiden. Can you imagine if he'd gone there and she didn't look like her Instagram profile?
I'm sure that absolutely happened.
Like she was a bit of a catfish. Can you imagine?
Well, what I want to know too
is I'm not a 23-year-old girl. I'm like a 56-year-old guy, but I just
1560 catfishing. Hashtag it happened.
It happens all the time. It happened to poor Henry, didn't it? With which was the one that he thought was ugly once he met her. Her
profile picture was just not representative.
Her profile picture
was a stock photo, actually. Stock painting.
Yeah, her profile picture had a little bit of soft focus,
a little airbrushing. The portrait artist who did it was a little
amazing. So funny that it happened even then,
right?
People even then were like, no, like make my cheekbones a little higher, and get rid of my wrinkles and like my
measles, like scars. If you could just touch those up.
Let's just soft focus over the pox marks.
If you can Photoshop my double chin out, that would be great. Oh my God, that's so funny. So
sorry, that was an interview.
No, it was hilarious. I needed that. I really did. So when he comes back, that's when actually it didn't even start in Scotland. It started in the Netherlands. Oh, I'm sorry. In Denmark, princess. She was in
Yeah,
Denmark.
get your Scandinavian
Did I
countries
say
right,
the
Karen.
Netherlands?
I think you said Netherlands, Norway, and Denmark.
Oh, well, okay. Princess Anne was from
Sure, wasn't
Denmark.
Finland?
This is because I didn't go back
Sweden?
and I didn't have time to color code my notes. It's all in red.
God.
I told you this was going to happen.
You can't do it without color coding.
I know. I only had my red pen. So she was from Denmark. He does go to Norway in order to get to her on the first leg. But so in Denmark, they're the ones who started their witch hunts first. And they were inspired by these storms. They're thinking people must be behind these storms. They're trying to foil their marriage. And that's when they started first. And so James was like, oh my gosh, I think that they might be onto something. We're going to stage our own witch hunts here too. And this is what I thought the most fascinating thing is that, and I did not know this at all. He was the one who personally was doing them.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think we touched very briefly on this when we were talking about Isabel Gowdy, but obviously we only went into it briefly because we then moved on to the actual Isabel Gowdy episode. So you can always go and listen to that one as well if you want to hear about that one specific witch. But yeah, I did know that he had like a witch finder general person, didn't he?
Well,
and he actually specifically, I think I'd watched, it's not Scottish, but I watched a documentary about the Pendle witch trials, which was really interesting. That's a famous one from England.
Okay.
Pendle witch trials. And I think he was there. Yeah. And it went into how they had, he had like this special witchfinder guide that was like employed by him. But that he actually did.
He himself,
which I think he was maybe a little bit perverted, you know. I think anyone that wants to like get women, get them naked to see if they've got marks on them, punish them.
Well,
I don't know. There's some kind of perversion.
For sure. Well, what they say, and they go into it in detail in this podcast, was they were talking about the fact that he basically positioned himself as he was like, I must be the devil's biggest target because
I'm so special.
He was like a bit of a narcissist. He was like, I'm probably the devil's greatest adversary, like in the whole world, because I'm so high up. So I need to go and like
I'm the king of everything.
I know.
Special.
But he not only that, but because it's like a new faith and he's the leader of the new faith. Yeah. That's why he thought that like he was the most important person. But not only that, but he was also like you're gonna laugh, but like he also was really into like his marketing team. So I told you you're gonna laugh. So he actually had pamphlets made and sent directly to England because at this point he was not yet King of England. He was James VI of Scotland, but he was not yet James I of England. Okay. And he wanted to be. So he actually had pamphlets printed up and sent to England, and it was called News from Scotland. And he was like, just so everybody knows, like the devil's after me and I'm gonna kick his ass. Like it was literally to let them know what he was doing.
Wait, I'd love to see a copy of that.
I'm sure they have
hilarious. They must still have a copy of it somewhere.
I know. So it was like this whole like marketing effort. Like everyone,
it just makes you realize
they don't change.
Times don't change. Times might have changed, but times don't change.
Oh my God. Well,
people still get up to the same bollocks.
Well, you know what's so funny about that is first of all, I 100% agree with you, but not only that, but in this podcast, they go into the nuances of their interrogation practices and how that they are still used today. And they were talking about how like the like influential power people and how they like to have a scapegoat and like what little political nuances. Not going to go into anymore. They do an amazing job talking about those things.
Deprivation.
I know. Yeah. So, but I just thought it was so interesting that like this whole marketing scheme of like, make sure everybody knows, like, attention, everyone, look at me. This is what I'm doing. And then he really would personally go. But then
let's face it. Can you imagine a royal family? Don't come for me. Can you imagine a royal family member who is not completely self-obsessed? if you are born into what's the most important family in the country, and you are told from childhood that you are the king of the country or the world or whatever,
right,
and you've got all that focus on you, you are gonna grow up a little brat who thinks they're super important.
that is true. Although he was an orphan. He was an orphan and he was an only child.
But was he
so
not like squirreled away and like he was actually probably raised by advisors, which I'm probably made it worse actually, because then he didn't have like a love from his mother, because at least in modern times, I would like to think they've possibly changed their attitude a little bit so that the kids are getting
I'm sure it's changed because now the monarchy, oh God, don't come after me, doesn't have the power that they used to really have. Like they didn't have a parliament back then. They just face exactly. And James, he had real power.
And I'm also sure that nowadays the monarchy, that when they have kids, they probably spend a lot of time with their kids, but it's in those days, in like Tudor times, they had the kid and the kid got shuttled off somewhere. They didn't even get fed by their mothers. It was wet nurses. So that is going to raise a kid that has got serious issues, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think of like Queen Elizabeth and Mary, like Queen Mary and all of them that, you know, that didn't even get, like, they didn't even live in the palace, I don't think, with their father.
Or they were, I feel like it depends on which one you're following, but they were always had drama and were scuttling from here to there.
That whole thing was like intrigue and drama, wasn't it? I couldn't think of anything worse than being a royal family member.
I know.
In the Tudor times. So
you
have to watch your back, I'm telling you.
Oh my God, I know.
Anyway, sorry, I digress.
No, again. It's all good. So the flip side, which I thought was equally interesting, if not more fascinating, was so you have the James getting in there in person and directing and actually talking to these women, and he's thinking that he has this power and he knows the right questions to ask to get these confessions. And then you have the flip side, and they kind of do a deep dive into what it would be to be a woman on the receiving end of this. And like, what does that mean for you to be a poor peasant girl who has
and suddenly meet the king,
and the king is freaking interrogating you? Like they really stop and talk about that, which I think is so freaking cool. And they have like a psychologist analyze, like, what does that mean? And this is where the fairy aspect folklore comes in, which is basically, for the first time, it could be in your whole life, thinking you're a 19-year-old girl who has worked as basically a slave in your rich homeowner's house. And then you have the King of Scotland staring you down, surrounded by a circle of like powerful magistrates who are like listening to your every word. And a lot of times these girls, they would keep talking because they're like, holy shit, they're really giving an audience. And not only that, but these girls are like, they're being tortured, right? They're sleep deprived.
There was no lawyering up in those days, was there? Or like, was it called Fifth Amendment? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Fifth Amendment. Yes. So they
such a good American citizen, except I'm not.
Really smart American. So they used to have, and you talked about this in your episode, they have like the pin prick experiment, right?
That's terrifying.
To find the mark of the devil. So they would prick all over their body to try and to find the one part that doesn't hurt, right? And you're stripped naked. So they were saying that, some girls, modesty, they didn't even go outside of their homes without a hat on.
I know. It was in the days when, you had to wear a skirt to cover your ankles. It's not like you were walking around with a mini skirt. You couldn't even have
your hair exposed.
I know.
So the thought
it was a different time.
Of disrobing now you like can't get people to cover up. And so
Now you're
they
walking
would,
around with a horrible under boob bikini.
and like your G-string like bathing suits, just no. And so some of these girls would start talking just so to avoid any of that. Like they'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, whoa, okay, oh, yep, this is what happened. Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. But that's where some of the most remarkable fairy stories come out of.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, well, that's kind of
Come to me.
two-pronged. One was that some people just started talking to like because they realized now they're saying things that people want to hear, so the torturers will give them a minute, they'll give them a break or treat them better as soon as they start actually offering up information.
Did they not realize that they were confessing, which would ultimately end in their death?
Well, I think they're not thinking in the long term. They're thinking
and
of
I guess
like,
at
oh,
that
you're stopping.
Point, you're kind of fucked anyway. Like you're not really getting out of it, are you?
No, but I think at that minute you're not really thinking about like long-term consequences.
Yeah.
You're like, please stop poking me like with your giant thing all over my privates.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard you say that to me, Karen.
That I have no words for you. I'm just gonna have my drink, which is okay. Oh my god.
Sorry, I had to go there. We're X-rated anyway. It's
fine. This will be an explicit episode. I'll check the box on this one.
Please stop poking me with your giant
please stop poking me with your giant
thing. I think that's a new t-shirt.
Oh my, that's not a t-shirt. I do think Incesties Besties is a good one though.
A t-shirt with like a witch finder pricker.
Right?
Stop pricking me.
Where is the hole? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? So fast forward to their actual fairy episode, which I thought was super cool, which was they said that like some of the best accounts of fairy encounters in fairyland happened right before the witch trials got really, really like well marketed, that everybody knew that they were happening, like right before that, when they were really new and people were not aware of what would happen to you if you confessed like your weird ass fairy stories. People would talk about it. Like, and so one of the best examples of this was a woman named Isabel. And I can't find it. Nope. I can't find it because I only have everything in red. Oh my God. It's the worst. What's her last name?
Just call her Isabel. Just call her Isabel.
No, Isabel. No, I need to know. It's like a big deal. Oh my God. It starts with a B. And now I've had my little drink and I can't remember.
I see. That's what a hot toddy does to you.
Seriously. Hot toddy with a side of Tylenol thrown in. Mm-hmm.
At least it's not that. What's it called? That one that makes you go crazy?
Oh.
Is it Ambien? Is that the one that makes
Ambien.
You go crazy? I don't think we've even got that over here. It must have a different name.
I used to take Ambien. My OB made me take Ambien when I was pregnant.
I don't even know what it is. I just know it makes you go doolally.
Sleep. It's just a sleep drug. Yeah, I didn't sleep for 9 months. My OB was like, you are taking this prescription. You are a crazy person and you need some sleep. And I'm like, no, I never took it when I was pregnant. I was like, I'm not taking that. I'll just be a crazy person with no sleep. Thanks. But I took it after he was born. It worked wonders for me. I had insomnia.
Feeding the kid in the middle of the night. I'm just gonna sleep through it.
I know, right?
Give me my Ambien.
But it's a little unnerving when your OB is like forcing you to take Ambien. But anyway, so Isabel Watson is her name. And she doesn't
start with a B at all.
It's really not a B. It's not a B. So she was put on trial when she was 60 years old. And she was put on trial. Yes, 60. And so she was before James started. So this was like really quiet. And she was like at the beginning before anybody knew what the witch trials were all about. So she didn't understand what she was implicating herself in or anything. She was like, oh, they're asking me all of these questions. Like, that's so nice. Sure, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Because they were like, the interrogators would be like, tell me everything you know about the devil. Like, what happened when you met him? Because as you remember with Isabel Gowdy, they were like, oh my God, I met met him. We had sex. It was amazing. Like some
He's
of these,
better than my husband.
yes, some of these witches were like, and the reason they got in trouble is because they were super mouthy and they like actually expressed their opinions. And that is why, sadly, they got in trouble. And so what they were finding way, way early is that people, so a lot of these women were like, oh no, I haven't really met the devil, but like the last time I went to Fairyland, like I met the fairy queen, and they would be like, wait, what? And that's literally what happened. And so they were like collecting testimonies for the first time, like they were like writing down these oral testimonies of these women. So Isabel Watson, like I said, was 60 when she was quote unquote interviewed, i.e. interrogated. And she was like, well, the first time she said she had been interacting with fairies since she was 18 years old. And the first time it had happened, she had fallen asleep tending sheep and she passed into fairyland. And while she's in there, she met fairies of all different sizes, big ones and small ones, and she bumps into her aunt because, as we all know, fairies are also kind of associated with the dead and dead relatives a lot of times. So it's not super weird that her aunt's is seeing her there, but her aunt does warn her not to eat of the fairy food, and we all know
you don't want to eat fairy food.
That's what sticks you there forever. So she said, awesome, made a note to self, don't eat the fairy food. So she stays in fairyland for 24 hours, and before she leaves, the fairies mark her on her forehead, much like the devil marks his victims' bodies, or so they say.
Did she get a Sharpie out, or was it like a chickenpox scar?
You know, it's so weird. She didn't say what kind of pen that they used, but the way that then the interrogators were interpreting that were like, well, fairies are not human made. They're not divine. God did not make them. So anything that's not godly must be from Satan. And so then they just equate everything with fairy as being the mark of the devil. So, and especially since the devil has all these amazing shape-shifting abilities, right? He's like ready to disguise himself to lure people all over the place. And that was just extra proof. Like, yes, he must just be shape-shifting into these other spirits. So that's clearly the sign of the devil. And you are, you know, that's, you're just basically confessing to your dealings. Now, in addition to that, and basically these interrogators would kind of let these women rattle on. So the women, as we talked about before, are thinking like, oh my gosh, these powerful men are like taking an interest in me and they're really listening to everything I have to say. And the powerful men are sitting there going like, holy shit, they're telling us this crazy ass stuff. We're listening to all of it. And then we're going to burn them at the stake when they're done. So it's like like that power differential of like what each other.
And also, if you're the kind of woman or person like me, and I bet you're the same because both of us can rattle on for ages, that if there's a silence, you speak to fill up the space, then they would have really got them good, you know. If somebody sat and interrogated me and just like had a silence, I would have,
especially early on, if you don't even know what it's even all about, you know, you're just fooled into thinking
you haven't spoken to Janet down the road and found out that actually if you open your mouth and tell your stories about fairyland that you're going to end up dead.
I know. So she also has this other confession story that she shares, which is super disturbing.
Oh, let's hear it. I love a disturbing story.
And it's all like written down and recorded because of her witch trial, like interrogation. She basically confesses that she had made a deal early on in her life and her marriage with the fairies, and it was a period in which her husband he got really sick, and so she made a deal with the fairies, and the fairies said that in exchange for her 2-year-old son, they would heal her husband. And make him better. So it is like a classic changeling story, which we have already covered. But basically the fairies put a log in the crib which would
Oh, a
present
little love
itself
baby.
to look like her real son. And
Yeah.
she was instructed not to feed it, and they should pass it through the fire, which she claims that they then passed the log through the fire and it almost burned the house down. Yeah, but that it was okay because the fairies assured her that her son was being taken care of in fairyland, which in actuality
she actually burned her son.
is probably not what happened. I know. So it's like
that's
horrifying.
so sad.
I know. But but changeling cases were actually super common.
Yeah,
like
and the thing
really
is,
common.
That's not witchcraft in
the
classic sense of talking of witchcraft. Here comes a cat up behind you.
I know.
In sort of, for if anyone was going to say, what do you think witchcraft is? Well, I guess it's changed now, but I would say herbs and spells and following the seasons of the year and performing rituals, not traveling to fairyland and speaking to fairies.
I know, but if this is your testimonial,
then they think that you're crazy.
You have the dealings with the devil. Yeah. And you know what else?
Because they were thinking that fairies equaled the devil.
Right. Exactly.
Not fairies or fairies. They wanted to get away from those pagan ideas of another world. So they turned it into everything that's another creature is evil and the devil and a manifestation of the devil.
Right. Correct. And you know what else is super fucked up is that
everything's super fucked up in this story.
I know.
What are you talking about?
I know. Hi, Dippy. I have a little feline visitor as we talk.
You're a little familiar.
I know, my little familiar. Was that there was a psychologist, was one of the contributors to this podcast, and he was saying that 4 to 5% of the human population hear voices that are not there and have to or see things that are not there. And he basically was like, there's no reason to suspect it wasn't exactly the same percentages, right? 450 years ago.
But also, my argument with that would be that if 4 to 5% of the population see and hear things that other people are telling them aren't there, who's to say they're not there? Maybe there is some other world, fairy realm, where people are saying something and it's just other people telling them that, there wasn't anything there because their mind wasn't open to that other world and they didn't see it.
I know. Well, there's so much we can unpack with this conversation. There's so,
do you know what I mean?
Well, I think there's like the 4 to 5% people who do hear things and see things, and then I think there's fairyland is honestly, I think it's something separate from that.
Yeah, that's true.
And then he was also talking about like they were bringing up the whole thing about how aliens, like aliens are like our culture gives us things so that we can talk about our experiences better. Yes. So to us, when people see things that are human-like but not humans, we'll be like, those are aliens. And back then it was like people seeing things that are human-like but not humans, and those are fairies. And so it's like, like people weren't talking about aliens in 1500.
Yeah.
But people aren't talking about fairies now.
That's just not part of their weren't aware of other planets in the sky, so they didn't put those things together.
Right. It wasn't part of their like cultural consciousness.
It would depend on what country you're from as well. That different cultures and different countries have their own version of fairyland, their own
right. They talk about it in like a different
ways. I know. I'm going to try and sort my lighting out a little bit, but it's probably fascinating.
Not gonna. So I want to though also talk about, there's this really cool lady, and her name I'll have to find because it's not outlined.
Oh God, here we go again.
I got it.
We just call her Isabel Watson.
I did have a minute, and her name is squared in blue, so I found her. All right, her name is Margaret Aitken, and this story is super fun. So she is from Fife originally.
Oh,
and
I like Fife.
she has been known. So she is a witch, and she is like has been deemed a witch by the whatever people power at be.
The
And
prickers, the witchfinder generals.
and she
What
says,
year was she? What was
she
she?
says, hey, so this is later on.
Okay.
This is later on in the 1600s.
Okay.
In, I believe it was 1661. She was known as the Great Witch of Belwery. And she said, yes, I am a witch. You're right. But I am actually like a super powerful witch because my greatest ability is to identify other witches. And
Oh,
so
she was quite clever,
yeah, she
actually.
was.
That's a good stance to take. It's like, keep me around
Yep.
and I will tell on everyone else, and you'll manage to get everyone else, but you'll only manage to do it if you keep me alive.
Yeah, she was like
quite clever.
Right? I know. And one of the researchers too was like, these people were not stupid. She was like, it was the man, and he was a professor, and he was like, these people were smart. Like, not just the witches, but also the interrogators. Like, there's a lot of like nuances into what was going on here. It's not as like barbaric and like ignorant as you would think. Like, they are operating within like the limitations of their time, but they are not dumb. Like, there are nuances, and there are like interrogation practices, and like they're leading the witness, and like there's a lot of shit going on here.
Yeah, I would agree. Just because I think that we have the tendency to sometimes think of people from the 1500s or the 1600s in really abstract manner, like they're much less human than us, because we have so much
dumber and less intelligent.
We can put filters on our selfies, and we can text people, and we've got the internet and all of these things that they didn't have then. But actually, their brains worked in the same way as ours. They just
like why I can't understand anything from Shakespeare, because the man was like a million times smarter than me than I was, clearly, obviously. So she was like, you're gonna need me, so you're not gonna want to hurt me. I can be of use to you, and I can tell you who the witches are. So they actually formed a special commission using her specifically to tour Scotland and do a giant sweeping tour of the whole country. And basically people would be paraded in front of her, and she would go one by one, identify who the witches were. And she claims that she could, now rather before it was a slow process, right? They'd have to disrobe, they'd have to do prodding, they'd have to do these long psychological torture sessions and sleep deprivation. That takes like a really long time.
Yeah, she could just go.
This was really super fast. She could look in their eyes. She was analyzing actually the vein webs in their eyes.
Oh, she was making it all up. Let's face it.
100%. So she
didn't like the look of somebody.
But she was just saving her own ass. So I mean,
she was like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So like, I'm just gonna choose this one. Yes. Like all the number threes. So like 1, 2, 3, witch. 1, 2, 3, witch.
Yes.
Like something like that.
But wait, this is so good. They need to have like a movie on this. It's honestly so
good.
They do?
Yeah, they need to have a movie.
Oh, I thought you were saying they do. And I was like, they do? What is it called?
Agreeing with you. I was like,
brain,
yeah, they do. Make a movie.
My brain is not working. I'm so sorry.
I don't think either of our brains are working.
I know.
I had a 5-minute pregnant pause on something earlier.
I'm gonna have to go in and like edit that blank silence out. I'm just kidding.
I just editing. Drink a hot toddy.
I'm not gonna edit anything. Who are we kidding?
I know. I was gonna say that. Wow, Karen, you're actually gonna listen through till you find that silence and take it out.
No,
I'm super impressed, because that is more than we ever do on any episode.
That's not true. I edited our ghost one when Ginger was our guest.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I added all sorts of spooky fun music. This goes on for 3 to 4 months. They have this going on. They really they dig in, and
she got a free tour of Scotland, which actually in those days would have been super unusual. You know, usually people wouldn't leave their village. She got a free tour of Scotland.
I know, I would love to. I want a free tour of Scotland.
You would love to. I'd love to be accused of witchcraft so I could get a free tour of Scotland.
Just be Margaret Aitken for one day. No, she murdered like thousands of people. So
we need the movie to be called Margaret's tour of. It's a little bit like a witch version of Men in Kilts or something. Margaret on the broom.
No, it gets so better. It gets way better though. You want to hear what happens?
Oh yeah,
I'm not even done.
I'm here for it.
So, okay, so they go along their way for a few months. They wind up in Glasgow. Now, Glasgow was almost all Catholics. So it's like a big deal to be switching to Protestant at this time.
Yeah. There is something there to do with football teams, but I can't remember what it is because I don't follow sports. So,
and actually, I need to check that. When I said 1661,
isn't that the year of that second wave of the witchcraft trial?
Yeah, but don't quote me on that because I took copious notes from this podcast, and
then I thought you were gonna say I kind of jumped back. Whiskey.
No, and then I just jumped back to 1597. So there's like a disparity there that I don't understand.
It's okay. I'm not bothered.
I'm sorry.
I'm just here for the witchy stories.
I don't know. I'm drinking. Who knows? So there was a minister here. And his name was John Cooper, and he was kind of a pain in the ass to everyone. Like he was not well liked by anyone. Like his parishioners didn't love him. The other ministers didn't love him.
Oh, what a shame.
He loved witch hunting, and he loved this Margaret Aitken lady because she made it easy for him.
Did they have an affair?
No, this is super. You're not ever gonna guess what happened. I love this actually so much.
Oh, I think I might have guessed, but I'm not gonna say it just in case it spoils it for you.
Okay, so
if I get it right, I'm gonna be so pleased with myself.
You have to guess. Ready, go. Guess what happens.
Did she turn around and say he was a witch?
No.
Oh shit. That would be an amazing
That would be a good one. That would be a good one. Especially if then he got burned at the stake. That would be cool. Do you want to have one more guess?
Can you imagine the movie? She goes around Scotland. She points out all these poor innocent women. He's a pain in the ass. And then right at the end, she gets him back by turning and going, "You're the biggest witch of all." And then he gets killed.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That would have been a better
end.
No, the ending is actually pretty neat, but that would be a really good ending. Do you want to guess one more thing?
No, that was the only guess I had.
Okay, so this is super cool. So the parishioners or whoever the witnesses were that are standing by while Margaret is naming her the witches in Glasgow within John Cooper's parish.
Yeah,
the witnesses are like, you know what though? Behind everyone's back, I don't know that I really believe that she can identify who witches are. So they took the same people that she had already identified as witches, mixed with some new people, switched around their clothes, and they put her to a test. So the next day, out goes the line of people, and she says, "Oh, yep, they're a witch. Oh, yep, they're not. Yes, they are." And it turns out she was very inconsistent.
Oh, come on. Really?
And,
she flunked the identity parade?
She flunked the eyewitness test lineup, whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah, the identity parade. Is that not what it's called?
I don't know. That sounds good. The identity parade. It's like the lineup. They mix
and in the UK, it's called an identity parade.
No way. So. You're making that up.
Where you go to the police station and you have to
They call that a lineup in the US. Just
lineup
identity parade. That sounds like a gay pride parade. Identity parade.
It's like all these queens and drag queens in their dresses.
We're having an identity parade, which would actually be way cooler than all of this.
We do things more fun over here.
I know. So they proved that she was a fake. But then this guy, and then so people are like shocked because this has been going on in their community, and people are like, "Oh my!"
They killed some of these women by this point.
This has already been going on in Glasgow, and they're like, "You've killed my mother and my sister and my daughter."
Helen,
Margaret.
Janet, Margaret. I knew it was a Scottish. I knew it was a Scottish woman's name. I didn't know what it was.
So
something. They're all something like that. Helen, Margaret.
So Cooper then, who is the head of the parishioner, has then, because he's the one who is like, okay, great, and he's the one who like sanctifies all of these murders, basically, and now people are pissed, and so Glasgow actually tries to cover it all up. They they go to great lengths to be like, no, that never happened. Like, we didn't do that. Like, they like backpedal and all this stuff to try to like.
They didn't want to admit that they'd wrongly murdered innocent women.
Yeah, which is like, it's a little too late for that, my friend.
Well, yeah, but also that kind of thing hasn't changed much throughout history either, really, if you think about it.
I know.
All these people that are in prison that are innocent, and because the state doesn't want to admit that they did wrong, they just keep them in anyway and refuse them a second trial. No, we're not going to give them a second trial. We don't think that they deserve it.
There's actually a lot of like uncomfortably close connections between like how they treated human beings then and like how certain aspects of the population are treated now, and like it's in everything from like the interrogation practices to like the power differentials and the power play between the super influential and the like people that have no rights, and like
humans are shit.
They're shit, and we don't learn honestly that much from century to century.
We think
we're all high and mighty, like now we don't do it. I'm like, oh, we're still at it.
We just cloak it in niceness.
Wow, we just are ignorant assholes as well.
Yeah.
So the cool,
be nice, people. Be nice.
I know. Just love one another.
We're all humans.
We are all humans. And there was a cool character who comes out of this, though, in history, and her name is Marion Walker. And I feel like she deserves her own episode because she, for 30 years, first of all, she's a woman during this whole phase, but she becomes this really big and loud defender of all the women that are wrongly accused during this period. Yeah, she's super cool. And she actually fights back pretty hard. And Cooper is really mad because she's trying to like put out there what he's trying to cover up, and so they really go at it. And so it's really neat. I felt like learning that she existed and had just the fact that she wasn't accused of being witch, and people this was one of the professors was talking about, like, we need to give these people more credit, and saying, because they were like, well, how come they didn't just like turn to her and be like, no, you're a witch, and like burn her at the stake? And he was like, no, because people really like believed her, like when she said, like she was, whatever her position was in the community, was that people like respected her and listened to her, and like she was such that people couldn't just turn around and be like, no, you're a witch, and like people knew enough that like she's calling them out on something serious. So it just gave me like a little like faith back into humanity. Like there were actually normal people back then who were like standing up for these women, and who were trying to make it known that like what was happening was like innocent people are just being murdered, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And it wasn't actually just necessarily, I know that a lot of the witchcraft trials were an excuse for people to get back at their neighbor that they had a fight with, or all of those kinds of things. Somebody that they didn't like, or somebody that was strange in the village that they didn't understand. But it wasn't necessarily all about that, because there were, to some extent, some scientific reasoning involved. It wasn't just you could just point at anyone down the street and say that person's a witch. and you would be instantly carted off to be
Well,
killed.
and I think that's like, because that's what Margaret Aitken was doing, though. She was just
Yeah.
pointing and being like, she's a witch,
Yeah.
and they would just go murder her, like,
Yeah.
without even a testimony, without
It's
talking to her,
awful.
without doing anything. Like, they were literally pointing and murdering innocent
I've
people.
not heard of her before. That's crazy.
That's super crazy. And she was, by the way, she was brought to trial and murdered and burned at the stake for that crime. So
I don't feel that sorry
just
for
to
her.
put a happy bow on that story. But I
feel like she, in some ways, she kind of deserves what she got. But in
she
other
does.
ways, she was also kind of probably very scared and looking after her skin.
That is true.
And
But she
doing it in the only way that she could feel right. But then there is also good examples throughout history of people not deciding to shit on a whole heap of other people in order to save their own skin. You've got like a little ounce of integrity, right, that you would then go, well, actually, I know this is going to happen to me, but I'm not going to allow all these other people to die. Well, so I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for her. No, I've got a little bit of sympathy.
Well, also because she could have also been like, out of 1,000 people, like, I only see one here.
And it's this old lady who's 97 who's clearly got like no life left.
She's practically dead already. But actually, and
that
actually,
person with the boils on their face, I can see that they've got a deadly disease. So like, let's call them a witch.
Like, right. Well, and not only that, to put an actual real number on this into the damage that she was creating, there was something called the Witch's Sabbath, which was I'm
really sorry, I'm just interrupting. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to pause it?
Whoever's watching on, here we go.
There you go. Now
whoever's watching on YouTube, because it was
candlelight or something.
It was getting darker and darker and darker in my studio, and it was getting to the point that
you did look like you were in a closet in the dark.
A little tiny face in the middle of it, which I'm not really bothered about, because then I don't have to look at myself. But that's better. Right, carry on.
Pretty
normal service is resumed.
So they had something called the Witch's Sabbath, which was completely fictional. It was like not even a thing. The magistrates like made it up, which is basically like these witches are communing with the devil in graveyards and in churches, and they're worshiping at his altar. And it was actually false. This was not actually happening. But at one of the proceedings, Margaret Aitken said specifically there was 2,300 of these witches that had gathered somewhere in Glasgow, and so that she was now at liberty to then name that many people, essentially.
Wow, that's quite a festival.
That's like
it's quite a party.
Okay.
Yeah, she could have said there's 5.
That's what I mean.
But I wonder whether she said there was so many because it was stringing it out and making it last a bit longer.
Gosh, that's smart, Lucy.
Because the more witches she had to find, the longer she thought that, like, if she'd gone on a tour around Scotland and her success rate wasn't very good, and she only found one witch in 3 months, they would have been like, nah, you don't really know what you're doing. We're going to kill you anyway. But because she was finding so many, it was almost keeping her alive for longer.
You're right. But geez.
It's still not very nice. What's her name?
Margaret Aitken.
Still not very nice, Margaret.
No. Yeah. It's really sad.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to shed light on that period, because it helped me understand how sadly, like, because these people, that folklore, especially some of these real rural areas where folklore, I mean, we talked about this last episode, that when I was talking about like all the brownies, like people had relationships with these spirits, like they were in like every single house. And now you have these witch hunts where like
Do you think it stamped a lot of them out? Do you think
I think it stamped a ton of them out because it was like you could no longer
able to talk about.
because you couldn't talk about it. Absolutely, and you would be
because
killed.
People didn't want to associate. If I speak about my fairy experience, then people might think I'm a witch, so I'm not going to say anything to anyone, which actually still goes on today. Where people, if they do speak about their fairy experiences, and this is what happened to me, there's a lot of people look at you like you're a weirdo. You've got two heads on your shoulder. Of course. You must have been on some hallucination drugs or whatever. And so there's still that stigma attached to that kind of thing, which probably has come from the witchcraft trial period, where it's like it's not allowed to be associating with any kind of otherworldly thing because it is saying that you are this kind of a person, which is associated with
absolutely. And fairy lore also like comes in and out of vogue. You know, it's like very trendy, and the like Victorians like love their fairies, and that's where it's fairies got wings, and like it was super trendy. Yeah, exactly.
They became cute in Victorian times.
Yeah, and then they resurged again when like Disney popped them out in 1950s when they had little fairy wings. But then between these times, you have these like darker periods where like it's super not okay. They also had mentioned, or I was reading, and actually I left my book downstairs. And they were talking about the interesting like Shakespeare, one of his, like he mentions certain fairies in like Midsummer's Night's Dream because one of his patrons was like supporting him and was a supporter of someone who like whatever, it gets like political. And anyways, it was interesting, but those things don't just happen to appear in those books. They're actually like, it's actually like an offshoot of like who is supporting who back there. And it's much more.
So the person that was supporting him wanted that in the book. Because, so he put it in there. Because,
or it was like a nod to, I need to go. I'm not going to talk more about that. As look at my dog is like dumpster diving behind me and like eating trash out of the trash cans. Disgusting. But it just makes me so sad, honestly.
It's an absolutely fascinating period in Scottish history, and it is certainly something we could probably talk about for ages, or have other episodes where we discuss certain witchcraft trials or instances of tales in little pockets of like one thing that I would like to dig into is whether that's on screen recording or not, is the Aberdeen witchcraft trials, because that's my local city, and it's something that I don't know anything about. How many people from this area got arrested, and what happened to them, and
I think
was there anyone in my village? Do you know what I mean? I'd love to know
absolutely. Well, there was something that's actually I had written down. One of these big surgeons actually started up in Aberdeen. It's in my notes somewhere.
There was quite a lot in Aberdeen. And there is a census of some sort. I think the Witches of Scotland podcast talk about that.
Oh, cool.
That you can go on a website and you can search under
you can
a year or name or area and see all the people that were executed for witchcraft in certain different parts of Scotland. You can actually there is a database like that is being produced, which is
I'm glad
totally
that people there's like a record of their poor lives. They should be acknowledged for like just it's awful.
And what I find really sad, without talking about this for the next 5 hours, which we could, I find really sad is that witchcraft was also essentially about herbal medicine and midwifery and all of those things, which has been essentially stamped out in our population to a lot of most people don't know that herb in that field is something that they could make into a tea, which would help their hay fever or help this ache and pain. People don't know that anymore. It's seen as being a little bit
it's
sinister,
still like tainted after all these
and
centuries.
I think that is partly to do with the hounding of women and witchcraft and all of that, which I think is so super sad.
Well, and Christianity too basically came in and was like, knock it off, like any form of paganism in any way, shape, or form. And they tried their best to like just stamp out all of it. And so a lot of that was lost. But I think there's just some still strong people throughout history that have like, you know, persevered, and like their little knowledge has been passed down. They kind of managed to like slip through the cracks. Thank goodness, and like get some of that down. And they did say in the podcast that, however, they really didn't tamp out all of it, because those really were very knowledgeable women who did their knowledge of herbs and being able to heal people really like was needed. And so as much as the Christian church tried to stamp that out, I think the people at the end of the day needed their services, quite frankly. And so they weren't able to strictly get rid of everybody, because they needed the midwives to deliver babies. Like they needed people who know things, because there wasn't anyone else there that did, you know, especially if you're in a teeny tiny village. So they didn't get everybody, thank God. Those are pretty powerful women. But yeah, it's like I'm glad I revisited it, because I don't think I think because of my little attitude towards Salem, it kind of like, you know, like being like, oh, that's just a tourist trap, kind of like shut out my my perceptions of seeing it as like an actual true real like bruise on human history, and actually the real tragedy that it really was, which it really truly was.
I know, and I think it's just so fascinating to hear more about it, and also the link to the fairy realm, which is something that we hadn't discussed when we talked about Isabel Gowdy. Obviously, when we talked about Isabel Gowdy, we were talking about this one particular trial and this one particular instance, but to know that there
was like thousands of others
throughout Scotland,
right?
And yes, absolutely fascinating. I do find it fascinating. That was so interesting. Thank you, Karen.
Oh my gosh, I hope I was able to do it justice at all. And definitely check out that series. And I'm gonna check out the one that you mentioned as well.
What was The Witches of Scotland?
The Witches of Scotland. I gotta write that down, not in red, so I can see it.
Highlight, circle. Put little love hearts around it.
I know.
You'll find it later.
I know, but yeah, I feel like I'm closer to my witch sisters after doing this episode. Like I have such a deeper respect. You know, I do.
And they didn't
I really
stamp
do.
It out because witchcraft is super popular now.
Yeah, I know, it's very trendy. So it went from like, what a good. It's fantastic. Whatever.
They can't get rid of us that easily.
That's right. The witches will survive. Do you know what you're doing for next week?
No.
You don't?
But I do have an inkling.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say, just in case I change my mind.
Yeah.
But I do think I want to do something that is maybe like a little bit less
dark. Yeah.
And actually, like, I'll probably change my mind 5 times, so I'm not gonna say, but I think that I'm possibly gonna do some kind of, you know how like we did kelpies or whatever, like a specific Scottish mythological creature. I think I'm gonna do something like that. Yeah.
I keep starting there. Like, I'm just going to do this one little thing.
I know, and then we go off on a tangent.
I just get super carried away because I think I realize, like,
it's all the books that we've got.
It's all the books, the damn books. And then I have these, like, great sweeping things I need to know. Like,
what happened? But why? What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life and why does this country exist?
Yeah. And like, how do we cure cancer while we're at it? Like, let's talk about that. Like, I want to know so much, but we do need to like go back to just doing like.
Well, I think do you know what I think is great? And what I am absolutely loving about our podcast, even I don't even care if anyone else doesn't love it. I love it. What I love is that we are never gonna, I feel like I'm never gonna run out of things that I really want to investigate. Because as soon as I even think about one particular, I'm gonna look at this creature or this thing, I go, but I want to do this one, this one, and this one, and then what about this castle, and what about this ghost, and what about this weird time in history, and what about the Battle of Culloden, and what about, there's like stone circles, and there's so much to learn that if you listen to us, you're going to be Scotland experts by the end of it. But it's so cool. I just love that. There's never ending.
I know. Pool of cool shit to dive into. I know. I feel the same way. It's actually like a problem because it's like my little tiny topic always like explodes. Like, we're going to cover this 100 years. But it's so good. And I'm fascinated by all of it. All of it. And by the way, while I was researching this, I kept learning about Tiri, and I didn't know it was its own island in the either inner or outer Hebrides. So now I find myself, I'm shooting Sean links. Like, we need to go here on vacation. Like, it like explodes, like it grows like arms and legs outside of the podcast. Just so you know. What
did you call it? What did you call it? The island?
I'm not going to say it out loud because I'm saying it wrong.
Spell it?
No.
Go on. Embarrass yourself. It's not like you've never embarrassed yourself before with the pronunciation.
Why?
You said Glasgow funny like 5 times this episode, and I didn't even pull you up on it.
Say it. Is it not? Now I'm afraid to say it. Now I'm like checking myself. Oh shit.
I want to hear so I can make fun of you because that's my favorite thing to do.
Is it not Tiri? What is it? The island. Tiri.
How'd you spell it? I've never heard of an island.
Tiree.
Oh, Tiri?
Is it Tiri? Oh, sorry. I didn't know I had to sing it. Is it Tiri? It's not Tiri. Maggie's like, what? What is he talking about? Maggie.
I don't know. We need somebody from the Hebrides to confirm that.
It's the most
Tiri.
Tiri.
I think
better?
I might have it, but I'll be so embarrassed if someone comments and is like, you got that totally wrong, Lucy.
I'm already embarrassed.
You might say Glasgow correctly, but you've got that name of that one wrong.
It's the most westerly island in the Inner Hebrides. So I've already Googled it. I've already sent links to Sean of our next vacation.
Oh, and
we're going. There's so much folklore
from
that area.
I would love to go is St. Kilda.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so St. Kilda, we should do an episode on it. Okay. Actually, it's super interesting. It's not like folklore fairy related, but it's super interesting.
Okay.
It was inhabited. It's like super remote. It is in the middle of nowhere.
It's an isolated archipelago.
Yeah, but it had people living on it. They were living in all these little cottages and they were fishing. It was this tiny little number of people that were inhabiting this island, really super isolated from the rest of Scotland, but did belong to Scotland, but it was super, super isolated. Yeah. And then eventually in the 1930s, they actually just said, we've had enough being out here. Can you come and take us away, please? And then, so they actually just took all of the residents and rehomed them somewhere else.
Oh,
so there's
random.
No one living on the island. There's just all the little houses. It's abandoned and it's a nature reserve now.
Oh,
but there are still the cottages. You can still see the cottages.
Oh, that's cool. There's so many islands. There's 650. I gotta go and feed my dog. She's literally like going to be climbing me and biting me in a second for food. Right, Maggie? Don't do it. In Tiri, there's 650 residents. That's what I told Sean. I'm like, that's our next home, right?
I'd love to go there.
It sounds amazing. And they have really low, like a low mountain. So you can go climb it in like a day. And it's not like a big giant thing. And there's like 18 beautiful beaches and they're all different. And there's no midges because of like the constant wind off of the island. And it's, oh my God, it sounds amazing. I'm already in.
I bet you don't get Amazon delivered there though.
What? No. I can't get a new folklore book every single week.
I bet
delivered
Amazon
to my
Prime
door.
doesn't go there. Bet it doesn't.
And by the way, if anyone is interested, Lucy and I are starting to put our library of our most favorite folklore books,
our extensive library,
on our website, which is onescott1not.com. And please, if you have any stories, we are dying to hear from you. They can be ghosty, they can be fairy, they can be alien abductions. I don't even care. It'd be cooler if they had some sort of Scotland tie-in, but it's not strictly necessary.
Yeah, we just love to hear your stories.
Yes, if you had any, please hang out with us and let us know because we really want to hear from you. And Lucy, I gotta go because Maggie is non-negotiable. She's already an hour late for her dinner and she's letting me know. So
do you know what? I'm like 2 hours late for my dinner, so it's okay.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. It's such a good time.
That was so fun. Thank you.
I always love it. I love you. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Okay, bye.